Thanks for tuning in. I'm here today with John Fitzpatrick, who teaches a variety of science classes, science-based classes. John, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Hello, I'm John Fitzpatrick, also known by Fitz. I teach oceanography, environment ecology, human biology, introductory biology, and almost anything they'll throw at me.
And ology, any ology.
Ologies.
Could you share with us maybe some challenges you've found with reading and your students, or textbooks and your students?
So challenges I've found and that I dealt with going through school is that we don't like to read too often, and trying to get your students engaged in reading and also comfortable reading, and everyone's strapped for time and wants to do other things besides reading. So actually making it optimal, or maximize your time and your effort when you're actually reading.
Oh, that's a really good point. I don't think we think about enough, is just that these reading strategies can help even people who don't like to read or who are just very busy, which is, you know, all of us, and our students' time is precious. So looking at reading strategies as a way to optimize their time. That's a really good point.
And also making it fun to read. And then we're lucky to be in a college setting where, like, the ancient Greeks used to sit on the steps. Like, everyone would come together and talk about what they're reading and what they're learning. In the college setting, it's a perfect time to get together and form little groups to talk about actually what they're reading and try to decipher it all, especially in biology or oceanography when it's really complex. It's nice to have little groups to get together and explain it to each other.
Yeah, to make that meaning.
And they also say if you're explaining it to someone else, you actually know it. So instead of just having a teacher in the front of the room teaching out, if you're guiding the whole classroom to get in these groups and you know what they're supposed to be learning, and then you can get them in that group focused on what they're doing and kind of guide the whole group and listen to what everyone has to say. And also, one of the benefits as a teacher is sometimes a student, you'll overhear them teaching to other kids like a complex issue, and you're like, that's a really great way to teach it. So as a teacher, it benefits your teaching to learn how other people break it down into simple words.
Yeah. What's a technique that you use, a reading across the discipline strategy, perhaps?
So one of the first techniques that you guys taught us was that I used. We used to take a syllabus and explain how to read a textbook in the syllabus and put a little paragraph there. And most students don't like to read your syllabus. So instead of reading that to them or explaining that to them in class, we actually go through it on the first day of class. So I'll actually get them to get out their textbooks. Some students might not have their textbooks. So if that happens, you get them to pair up with people that do that, have the textbook. And then you get them to go into the table of contents and review what's in the table of contents, what it says. And also that way, when they're reviewing all the different chapters, they kind of get that schema activated and they understand more what the whole class is going to be about. And so they go into the table of contents and figure that out. And then we might jump into the back and figure out like the glossary and get them into little groups and figure out what's actually in the glossary. And they talk about how they could use it, and then also the index as well, and talk about how they could use it. And maybe like if they have a multiple choice question, how they can figure out the answer by jumping to like the index and then diving into the chapter that is in, and it'll save them time by teaching that. So kind of instead of just telling them how to do it, actually showing them. And in my Biology 100 class, even though it's a college level class, when I would do this, a lot of my students would come up to me afterwards and be like, thank you so much for explaining it to me and showing it to me. You're the first teacher that's ever done this for me. So if we can get all our teachers to get on that attitude that, oh, how come these kids don't know this yet? Instead of expecting them to know it, actually doing it with them. And that way we're bringing all our kids up to that high standard that we want. Because it's really easy to teach the really good kids, but we really need to bring everybody up to that good level so we can challenge the good kids. Or the
One of the things I heard you say that's so useful is this is an icebreaker activity as well. Students are immediately knowing that they're learning about each other, they're learning about the course, but they're also learning to dig into the text, that the text is theirs. It's not just something that's apart from them. Immediately, they know that this is a class where the textbook's going to be used. It's not going to stay in plastic wrap, right? And it's something that is a tool for them and is a friend to them, and sort of helping them have that exposure early on, I think, can build that network of readers. Great. What about any kind of specific advice you would have for readers after being a reader in your discipline? Is there any sort of reading strategy or technique you use in the sciences?
So I think just making everyone more comfortable. And science, as much as they don't think of it as a foreign language, it actually is. It's mostly Greek. So it's a foreign language in itself. And then also all these complex ideas and concepts on top of that. And we only have one semester for a lot of the students to get their science class, but to kind of treat it as a foreign language is very important and help students understand that, hey, you're not supposed to know every word in the textbook. So another strategies would be like skim the first chapter, skim parts of the chapter, and have each student pick out a couple words right on the first day that they don't know. And then each student does that, and then you can have it on an index card, and they can write the word on one side. On the other side, they can draw a picture what they think it means, and then on another index card actually put the definition. And then that way you have all the students bring it up and you lay them down and stack them up, and then you like divide them perfectly and have students come up and pick them, and then they have to go find their partner and their match their partners up.
Oh,
so
how fun.
That's another way to get into vocabulary and like learn vocabulary, and then they talk into each other, and then they're learning friends, and they have to go around and critically think, oh, that picture doesn't match this definition. And then you're going across art, English, sciences.
All across the disciplines.
All across the disciplines, and breaking it all down, because in real life there's no such thing as disciplines. So it's really important to stop breaking it down in disciplines and realizing and teaching all our kids that, hey, like, I know this class you think it's torture and you have to take it, but it's actually going to do you well because you're going to use it later on in life.
That relevance. How has RAD affected your teaching, you think?
For me, originally it was RAD and WAC. So for me, RAD really made it so I could make my classes more personable. Like, I was brought up just doing the straight up lecture style classes where you just lecture and have a PowerPoint. And that was good initially because that way you really learn your content in order to lecture it. But then with all the different RAD and WAC strategies and making your class interactive and knowing your material really well, you could guide your students in order to make it so they're guiding the class and they're more engaged in it, and not just you guiding the class and you talking to them. And for me, it's been really successful because I've had even though I had a lot of students at many times, it made it so I could become more personal with all the students. And actually, when you're doing that, you're listening to what they're talking about, what they're engaged in, and figuring out, and if they have a misconception about things, you can come back together and like join up as a class again and break these misconceptions down and explain it better. So, and then also get them to draw on the board or whatnot. But to me, it made my classes way more personable and more fun for me, because sometimes it gets boring just lecturing. So to actually be able to communicate to students and they know that I know they're there is really good, because they really want that human, or everyone wants the human connection.
Absolutely.
In order to learn. And if you make the classes fun, everyone's going to learn. But if it's just sitting there, and even though you're covering it in a PowerPoint, doesn't really mean they learned it. So
beautiful. Well, thanks for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you guys for supporting my teaching and teaching me new ways to engage my students. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Go have fun and be rad.
Be rad!